inside of the packet. You remember the numbers that Stanek presented to us previously as their recommendation? We're going to enact at 50% of their recommendation.
And can I ask, during our last, there was the one finance meeting that I think was a month ago, where we had some visitors and we kind of talked about it. Were there any conversations between then and now that we've had with folks in the development community on this?
Yeah, I have had numerous conversations with Trevick, with the High Point Realtors Association, and several of the builders of the High Point Builders Association. Keep in mind that this institution is also part of state legislation that was passed in 2017 that is the impetus for the whole start of this change. So we're abiding by state law. These are just steps in trying to institute it in a manner that will be effective and in the best interest of High Point.
I've also spoken with Trevick and with the Builders Association, and I think they feel very satisfied. Their voices have been heard and that they've, been considered.
Nobody likes an increase. Any other discussion? Okay, hearing none, I'll call the roll for the vote. How do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson, who's now with us.
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Moore. Aye. Councilman Williams.
Aye.
Councilman Hudson.
Aye.
Councilman Jones.
Aye.
Jefferson. Aye. The mayor votes aye. So the consent agenda items are approved by a vote of 9-0. That is all for today. Next on the agenda are the Prosperity and Livability Committee items. There's actually only one. And for that, I'll turn the meeting over to the chairman of that committee, Councilman Wesley Hudson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Prosperity and Livability Committee met at our appointed time and had further discussions of a section of the Southwest Greenway where the Greenway ends 7th Street. This is the presentation that the High Point University students had before council several months ago as well. And it was voted and approved, though not unanimously, to ask for consideration from council to approve this section. I will point out in your attachments that the budget impact of this would be next year's budget and that funds are not available for this item. And with that, I make a recommendation to approve.
Second. I'd like to make a substitute motion. Because this.
Hold on. The motion was made by Councilman Hudson and seconded, I believe, by Councilman Jefferson. Okay.
To do what? I didn't understand the motion.
The motion was to approve the item.
Oh, okay.
Yep. And okay, Councilman Jones.
Because this is general funds and it has the look and feel of nonprofit allocations, I make a substitute motion. This goes to Finance Committee for consideration under the nonprofit allocations in this year's budget.
Okay.
Can I make a comment?
There's a second.
Second.
Okay, there's a substitute motion to place this item in finance, and it's been seconded by Councilman Hudson. Is there any discussion?
Yes, Mayor Wagner, I'd like to point out, this has nothing to do with nonprofit allocations. This is a city project. The report was done by city staff, and it has nothing to do with nonprofit.
Mayor Wagner, I would also like to point out that the number associated with the request is at $100,000. Can we get clarification? The original ask, I think, was 82. Can we get an explanation of why?
Mr. McDonald, can you address that?
Apparently not.
Good evening, everyone. To address that, the transportation and engineering services work together to pull together an estimate for this, these modifications to Cassell Street to convert a portion of it over into a greenway section between Vale Avenue and West Ward Avenue. Our estimates for that, we went back and refined those a couple of different times, and they consistently came out somewhere in the $80,000 range. I would stress, however, that those are just estimates. We don't know what the exact cost of the project would be, because it would be more than likely put out for bids, and bids could have the tendency to come in higher than that. Maybe they'll come in lower, but we don't know that. And the recommendation to include $100,000 as a budgeting number is simply to make sure that we have the hopefully have enough funds to be able to execute the project if it's approved.
May I ask a question of Mr. McDonald?
Yeah.
So Mark, could you please explain to me, in less than 3 years, 2018, the estimate was 40 to 50,000. So I'm just curious as how it, in less than 3 years, had 100% increase. And then from a week ago, when we approved this through P&L, we're at another 20% increase.
Well, I don't know that I can really speak to what it was several years ago, other than at that time, it was probably just a very ballpark estimate of what cost might be for that conversion. Also, costs have risen dramatically on all construction projects that we have seen, as we saw not too long ago with our traffic calming projects, how the bids that came in from contractors were much higher than we expected. Again, the additional funding from $80,000 or $82,000 to $100,000 is simply to ensure that we have enough money in the budget, if it is approved, to be able to carry the project through.
Also, in the staff report, it shows 150 feet of sidewalk that's not necessarily necessary because it's already a 48-foot wide street. I am aware and do understand about the ramp options and a little bit of sidewalk, but I don't think that 150 feet is necessary in this project. So I really don't think it would go over 82,000.
Okay, is there any other discussion?
Just to help me get better for clarity, I guess, Mr. Mayor, I'm asking the chair. You say that this was brought partly by High Point University students. I do remember that they showed support for it. I don't think they brought it.
Correct.
But, and then is this not a city project in the sense of, or is there an attachment of a nonprofit to this? Is this a nonprofit project, or is this a city drafted basically by recommendation of maybe citizens and then created as a project for this within the city's purview? Or is that what we're looking at? That's what I'm asking.
This is not a city initiative. This is an initiative that was brought to us from Southwest Renewal.
That's not correct. Mark McDonald, could you please talk about the initiation of this street project and who initiated it on staff and give us some more understanding of that?
Councilwoman Peters, quite honestly, my recollection of that is that it was something that was proposed by the Southwest Renewal Foundation, and staff pursued it from that recommendation.
Could you please, I don't know if Mr. Tillery's in there, could you please look and see if that portion is part of the master plan through Parks and Rec of our greenways?
Councilwoman Peters, Mr. Tiller is not here. I don't know if there's anyone on staff who might be able to address it. Mr. McCaslin,
Master plan for P&R will not be presented to a council. It's underway now.
Okay.
Greenway master plan is underway now and will be about April, May of this year.
okay. Did you get that, Ms. Peters? It's
No, I did not get that.
Parks and Rec is still working on the current master plan, and it's expected that it'll be presented to council in April or May of this year. So we don't know for sure whether this is part of that master plan or not, because it's still being formulated. I thought it was part of the plan.
It's part of the southwest.
Oh.
Greenway plan,
Right.
but not the city.
Gotcha.
Can we make another substitute motion?
Yes. Like to propose one?
I would like to propose a motion to approve $82,000 to construct the part of the Greenway between Vale and West Ward.
Okay, there's did anyone not hear the motion? Okay, is there a second?
Can we get clarification on the motion? Can we have discussion? Or do we have to have a second before we discuss?
The motion has to have a second before we can discuss it. Is there a second for the second substitute motion?
I think he's asking for clarification before he can second. Because for me, I'm trying to figure out, I heard what Director McDonald said about the 82,000 gap to 100,000, and that's sort of baking in, I think, some wiggle room. I think that's what you said, Mark.
The motion that's been proposed is to build this section of Greenway for basically for us to set aside $82,000 for the construction of this section of Greenway. Is that correct, Ms. Peters? Did I say your motion correctly? Councilwoman Peters, are you with us? I lost her.
She's virtual too.
That was my
Yes, I'm here. I'm here.
Did I state your motion correctly that it's to build this, for us to commit to build this section of Greenway at a cost of $82,000?
Yes, that's correct. The only
Think
reason
they can
I'm
hear
making
me.
that substitute motion is because if we're not going to approve 100, I'm hoping that we could approve 82. I just want to get to an approval.
Okay, so that's the motion. So is there a second?
Second.
You got that? Councilman Jefferson seconded that motion. Okay. So is there any discussion on the second substitute motion? And just as a procedural note, we'll have to vote in these in reverse order. So you vote on the second substitute motion first, which is the 82,000. If that motion passes, we're done. If it doesn't pass, then we're back to the first substitute motion, which was to place this item in finance for consideration along with other budget items. And then if that one doesn't pass, then we're back to the original motion, which was the approval of the $100,000 for the project. Okay. So is there any discussion on this item?
I just don't think it's clear as Councilman Jones. I don't think it's clear to me at this point in time if this is a city project or a nonprofit project. And that's why I wanted to discuss in Finance Committee. If it's a city project, then that's an acceptable use of general funds. If it's not an acceptable use of general funds. It needs to come through nonprofit allocation dollars. And for that reason, I think it should be discussed in Finance Committee to clarify, not to say no to the project, but to get clarification as to where the money comes from.
If I may, on that note, I agree that if it's something that's dealing, that comes specifically from nonprofit, that we do not forego the process. But to me, I'm not clear. I think I need more information, but I don't necessarily think it needs to go to finance for that, for us to get more information on that. I don't know if it's just a matter of, even if we just moved it to, are we still having the Wednesday? We are still having the, okay. I didn't know if that's something that we can do that with. I don't know if that's legally allowed, that we can move it to that so we can have more time to at least digest this.
It's a recess of this meeting. So if we don't take action on this item, technically we could still take action on it on Wednesday.
With another motion.
But can we get an answer from city manager that this is indeed a city project?
I think it's just a matter of us getting some more information from staff on the history on this, if that's possible. Just a little bit more data.
If I recall correctly, because we deliberated this in our P&L committee meeting last week, and the information that was, if I'm recalling correctly, it was shared with us that several iterations of council ago, this idea was included in a proposal for, I think, that part of High Point. And whether that was something that the city put together a task force to look at that or whatever it was, I do think that there was a mutual alignment of support for this kind of effort. I also think that, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, the Greenway is a city-owned and city-maintained piece of property. So when we start talking about improving a city-owned and city-maintained piece of property, I do not think we're talking about a nonprofit project. I think we're talking about a city project. Now, whether there's a group of private citizens, if you will, who happen to have support for a city-owned improvement, I don't think that makes it a nonprofit thing. I think if that was the case, we look at a lot of other improvements we've made and say that they weren't city improved things. Whenever Ford High Point thinks we should do something downtown, whenever Rotary Club thinks we should do something at the library, I think we find all types of reasons to call them nonprofit things. It is a city-owned and city-maintained piece of property. And so I personally, based on our P&L discussion, I get, for those who weren't in P&L, I certainly can understand why you want more deliberation. I can appreciate and respect that. But respectfully, P&L did vote to approve this after getting all of the information. Ms. Darr and Mr. Collins made resounding points in favor of this. They've also done lots of work. I think council always appreciates whenever private groups of citizens do lots of work to secure other funding from private foundations, state interests, things of that nature. And certainly to not jump out there and support something like this is in no way incentivizing me for all of the great work that I think is done. And that's just to be clear. I do not think this is one of those things where we say, well, it's nonprofit, so we throw it over to nonprofit. I think it is city-owned, city-maintained. I think the city obviously has an interest in this. It's just whether or not we want this to be something that we support on the same level of the other things like downtown and stuff like that we always want to support. So that's my personal sort of impression of that and recollection.
And for the safety of our High Point citizens.
Anyone else like to speak on this? We're on the second substitute motion, the 82, I'll call it the $82,000 motion. Anyone else who'd like to speak?
I will say that if you do agree that this is a city project, then by definition of the city manager's job description, it is his job to create the budget, not city council's. And that's spelled out in his job description. Our job description is to create protocol. We've done that. If we tell the manager how to create a budget, we're doing his job, not our job. So if it is a city project, I'll concur that it's a city project, but if it is, the city manager has the call to create the budget, not us.
Point of clarification, Madam Attorney, is that true? For some reason, a lot of that just didn't sound like something that was right. He's saying that about.
Well, I found that it was on point because it is generally the manager's responsibility through staff to bring things that are timely with regards to the budget.
But if it's
what I thought I heard.
But to say it's not in council's purview to ask that things be in the budget, I sat through June 2020 and we did a lot of talking about things we wanted to see in the budget, and then the manager put in the budget. So I'm a little confused here. I know I'm only sort of a young council member, so someone help me out here.
No, my interpretation wasn't that it wasn't within council's purview to do that and to bring things forward, that the normal course of business is not that generally it is through staff and through the manager's office. And I don't want to put words in council member Hudson's mouth, but that was what I thought the point.
Yes, the difference is we're not making a recommendation to the manager. A recommendation to the manager from city council is fine. We're giving him a directive. We're giving him a directive to spend money in the budget. That means we're creating the budget. We're not giving him a recommendation. That's different.
According to the staff report, in the staff report done by city staff under the guidance of the city manager, it is asking city council to approve this item. And that's basically the only thing I'm looking at.
But if the funds are not available in the budget,
That's not correct. This recommendation did not come from staff. This recommendation came as working on action through the P&L. There is no one on staff recommending this.
So if you all can just help me here, because I'm having a hard time, again, I'm going to bring up the point I said earlier, when I think we're faced with items that have either high interest to us or low interest to us. And so I'm drawing parallels in the downtown economic development incentive policy, which our mayor presented to us. And we essentially put it in the budget as if it was the gospel. I don't recall that being something that staff originated, staff created, and then staff presented. I recall that being something that our mayor actually worked on, maybe even with some private citizen help to bring to us. And so what I'm a little confused about, I guess it's one of those things where it's saying that there are private citizens, several council members who like something going in the budget. No staff member here is willing to support it. And so that's why it's out of protocol. Help me see the parallels. Maybe I'm oversimplifying.
I don't think that the point, this is Councilman Moore, with due respect, Councilman Jefferson, I don't think that it's that no one, it's the protocol and the procedure. I don't think to say that anyone on the staff doesn't support it. I think the timing of that comment is off. I don't, because we don't know how they feel. What they were just stating is that as of tonight, it's not staff, if I'm reading what Mr. McCaslin just shared, is this was not brought forward by them for tonight's meeting.
Councilman, this is Councilman Holmes, Councilman Moore. I think without putting words in Councilman Jefferson's mouth, I think what he's saying is that if we're discussing the issues of protocol and how the budget is created and the issues of precedent about things that have been put in the budget that have not necessarily been staff originated, that we've also done very similar in the past to what Councilwoman Peters is asking us to do right now. Is that not correct?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
So what I'm saying is, if we've established precedent that an extra budget, budgetary item can be added with cooperation from private citizens and members of council, and then be added and suggested to the budget, and then have that adopted in the budget by city management, then that would make Councilwoman Peters' motion absolutely appropriate, because we've done that in the past, correct?
Yes, and if I could, Councilmember Jefferson, clearly council has the authority, if you feel that there's something that you want to vote on that has such a high level of importance, you want to go ahead and make that decision, and then it's up to the manager, et cetera, to find that money somewhere. But that clearly council has that authority. It's just generally the pattern is the opposite. But sure, council has that authority to do that as well.
I'll clarify a couple things. First, if I can go back to Councilman Jefferson's point about the downtown incentive policy. That was actually created in conjunction with staff. The city attorney and I and the director of EDC all worked on that policy together. It wasn't something I drafted or that was handed to me by someone else. It was created through the work of staff.
And with knowledge of the funding.
But it was created because, I lean on like we all do, I lean on our legal staff and our economic development experts to make sure we're doing things correctly and legally. But I think what we're beating around here, the bush we're beating around, I guess you'd say, is that I think there's some folks on council who it's not a reflection of whether they're for or against doing this. I don't have a problem with doing it. A big question for me is during COVID and knowing what we know and what we don't know about our budget situation, I think it's potentially a mistake on a couple of levels to go ahead and commit to do this. First of all, we don't know how much money we're going to
because we don't know what the COVID financial impact is going to be on next year's budget. And secondly, like as the attorney alluded to, this is kind of a backwards way of that we've typically done things. What is kind of the situation we're kind of in is where we're almost creating an earmark, where we're telling staff, no matter what you do, this item has to be in the budget. And personally, I think that's kind of a slippery slope for us to go down. As a council, we all have different ideas, and the way we've always done things typically is you get an idea, you talk to the staff about it, you kick it around with the group, and you see if there's enough support to bring it, and then you have the staff work on it, and you bring it back to the council as a whole. I would be worried about us creating a precedent where we're basically starting to earmark funds for things when we really don't know what our budget position is going to be. And for me, that's a reason that you might want to stick it in finance until we know a little bit farther down the line exactly what our budget situation is going to be. Last year we had a very dire budget situation. We had to cut back on the museum and had to lay some people off, and we were under a hiring freeze. I don't know where we're going to be, and I'm not sure staff knows either. There's potential money coming from Washington. If this bill in Washington passes, we don't know how much that's going to be. So for me, it's not so much about I think there's probably a majority of council that supports building this section of Greenway. For me, it's more of a question of how do we pay for it, and how does that impact and fit into the budget that we're going to make in several months.
Mayor, if I may add.
And Mayor Wagner, I just wanted to thank you for realizing that the exact way that,
Go ahead.
can I speak? The exact way that we did this was exactly what you just said. It was, brought to staff, worked with it, brought to committee. So I feel like every step was done properly.
Councilman Jones.
Yeah, I agree with what you said, Mr. Mayor. I do hope that this project can be done, but I have a responsibility to the taxpayers to call it what it is. And if it is a city project, then we should ask the city manager to put it in the budget, and we'll vote on that budget in June. And if it's not a city project, then it need to be treated as a nonprofit, and we need to fund it using allocations of our nonprofit budget. But I don't feel that it's responsible to just approve something with all the cutbacks we've had to do and call it a city project. And we've got a few days, we can leave it open, however you guys want to handle it, but I cannot support something that's not in the budget if we didn't tell staff to put it in the budget.
Not to go into circles, this is Councilman Williams. And like I said, it was just a matter of information. If at any point when Councilman Member Peters said that this did go to staff, went through that vetting process, then I'm sold on the city's project part. I just need to know that.
Sure.
You see what I'm saying? You understand what I'm saying? I just need to have an understanding. I am hesitant to make a motion to hold it to Wednesday, but I just want more information on that part. If it's the attachment, if the information that's here, that staff holds, forgive me about not being at the P&L, because I have enough on my plate not to make every one. But if that's in there and it shows that it was embedded and handled with the city, then I'm for it.
Sure.
Yeah, so here are my thoughts. And I think I got to shoot it a little more straight on this response here, guys. So, number one, Councilwoman Peters didn't just throw this and say suspend the rules and ask for this to be on the agenda tonight. She didn't do that. It was actually, I had known for several weeks that we were going to hear it in P&L a couple weeks ago. And all of us knew it was in P&L. P&L had really good deliberation about it. Anytime a committee of this body has really good deliberation about something, we typically give the confidence and trust to that deliberative body that if they come to us with a full-on motion for something in good faith, then we feel pretty solid about it. It wasn't one of those things that snuck past staff. It's actually been a recommendation that's been looked at and pondered for several years. So this notion of us going backwards on things, I still feel like there's a precedent for that. But if you give me a second, I bet I'd find it in one of our minutes. The other point is that I don't think we're going any type of backwards here, because plenty of folks have seen it. Plenty of folks have talked about it. To say that, we're earmarking and saying the things we want to have there and it sort of steamrolls the process to get stuff into a budget. No, this is just not as high up on our priority list. That's me shooting it straight. I think that let the minutes reflect. If this was higher on our priority list, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Because if you say to me that we can't approve something responsibly because we don't know what our money outlook is going to look like, dog, we've been approving stuff and adding stuff all along. Like we do that all the time, and we call it economic development. And when the private citizens made a presentation to us that said this can have an economic benefit for a community of High Point that happens to inhabit or have Black and brown residents inhabit it, and that it can have an economic impact on that area. In my mind, the same way we can find money to make money when it comes to our economic development incentives, it's really just a matter of, do we want to do it or not do it? And I know folks are saying, no, we all want to do it, but the deliberative body that took the time to discuss it, that's the junior league. They discussed it, but let the real folks about finance discuss it. I'm gonna be honest, that's kind of how I felt just now when you guys said you guys discussed it really, really well, but instead of y'all discussing it, we're going to discuss it. We already discussed it really well. And I think we had someone visit us and join us who wasn't even on the committee, like with us. Like we had really good discussion. This is a city greenway. We either want to spend money on something that we think can benefit a part of our city, or we don't want to spend it on it, or we just sort of keep kicking the can down the road on something for an area of town that seems to kind of be the trend. We can say all day long it's not responsible because we don't know our situation, but we've been spending money all year on potential economic development projects, not knowing what our financial outlook is going to be. And we do it because we say there is a benefit that we believe will come from the money spent. Do we prioritize the benefit that'll come in this area of town as much as we care about the benefit that comes in a different or for a different like economic benefit? I mean, I don't know if I'm, and again, I know I'm the youngest person here and how I understand things. I know I'm so new to this, but I feel like no one said anything to me that's a little different than the fact that we just don't prioritize this as high as the other things that we see as economic benefits to our city. That's the simplest way that I see it. And I hate to have made it as straight as that, but that's how I see it right now. And unless it's explained differently, I don't see it any differently.
Mr. Manager, our economic development funds, they're budgeted, is that correct?
Yes, they're budgeted.
And they generally come
Prior
out of
year.
the electric fund and can't be spent on things like greenways, right? It's a dedicated pot of money that we can't move over to spend on other things like.
That is governed by the policy that this council has adopted over the years. It has a set of criteria of how it can be spent.
I'll also add that a lot of the dollars that are spent from that economic development are going right where this greenway is. So it's not that we're neglecting this part of town. Southwest Renewal knows that. A lot of the economic development goes in the southwest quadrant to kind of bolster up the manufacturing that has left the area.
We've approved several.
Mr. McCaslin, is Cassell a city-owned street?
It's a city maintained street. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, is the report that was given to us to approve this tonight, was that done by staff? Is this a city project?
It's a city project if the city council approves it.
Thank you.
And I appreciate the time that P&L went through to discover this, but committees are just committees. And I have just as much right to review anything that any council member wants to propose to this city as anyone else. Just because the four of us in the finance committee discuss something, any council member has the right to pull that out and question the thoughts, feedback, and input of the finance committee. And I apologize, I wasn't at the P&L committee where this was discussed, and that's why I would, if it's, I guess I'm just going back in circles in a way. If this is a city project, then I don't have a problem with it being approved, but it doesn't feel that way, and it feels like a nonprofit allocation, the way it sounds, and I'm not ready to support it without getting a few questions answered between maybe even now and Wednesday.
Can we get clarification on how bonuses and whenever we decide to pay out leave for policy changes to leave policies? I mean, we just approved a leave payout. We just approved several leave payouts. When we changed our leave policy, folks were going to lose days. We approved paying them out, and we also approved bonuses. I just need clarification. Are 100% of those funds generally earmarked in the budget specifically for, can we get clarification on that?
That was an amendment, wasn't it?
Those funds would come from funds that are budgeted for salaries for city employees.
Yeah, if it's not in the budget, we would have to amend the budget to make that possible. So in those instances, that money was already there, and we just essentially had to be redirected.
So this is Councilman Holmes. For the process of moving it back to committee, if it went back to finance, and say for instance there was a 2-2 vote, does this project die in committee? What is it able to be?
Come to council with that. It would come to council. It just wouldn't have a recommendation.
It wouldn't have a favorable recommendation.
Yeah.
So
it would still have the favorable recommendation of P&L because that's already happened.
Right. So moving it back to finance for discussion when the only point of clarification that we seem to be asking for is whether or not it's a city project. I don't think that kicking it back to committee to have us debate one item is prudent. We can get that answered even if we table this until Wednesday to recess session. We should be able to come up with it in the manner of a day or so whether or not this is an actual city project and have that answered, and then close this item out on Wednesday. Because I don't think putting it all the way back in finance for another few weeks, waiting for another few weeks is prudent when this is the only point of clarification that we're waiting on.
I don't think that's a budget impact. Yeah, piece is still sitting out there, not knowing. I know staff. It takes, I don't know, like 3 to 5 months to put together the budget. So, that is, from looking at it from a financial standpoint, is it needs time. We don't know where we're at.
We talked about this 2 weeks ago. Has staff been attempting to find and identify where this could come from in the budget?
My understanding is council is recommending that it be put in next year's budget. So no, sir, we have not identified any funds for the funding of this project or any project.
Yeah.
For next year.
So the point about having the discussion about budgetary impact, can you help me with that one, Councilman Moore? Because I'm trying to figure out if it's not impacting the current budget and we're looking to approve it for next year's budget. I'd help me out there.
After coming off of the year we just came off of and still living in that year, we're not far enough down the accumulation of information of staff gathering from all departments of what their numbers and their ask or proposals are going to be, and the budgetary impact it's going to have on departments. The fact that we basically cut nonprofit totally out last year. Those are part and parcel of a very dynamic and multifaceted budget that they put together to bring to us. And I just feel like we're not that far down the road yet. And we also could very hopefully have the Parks and Rec City Greenway or master plan maybe to fruition in time for the part and parcel discussion as well.
it sounds like what we have the opportunity to do is to prioritize this project by saying we'd like to see it in this coming budget that the manager presents to us in June or May, whenever that time comes. And I think it's still well within our prerogative whenever that budget comes around to say, you know what, after looking back at it, there's absolutely no way to do it. But if we go ahead and vote on it now, then we know that there's no way we're seeing a budget in May or June without it at least being considered. That's what it sounds like to me. We voted on a strategic initiative a year ago in February that ended up making it into the budget, but it may very well have fallen by the wayside had we not said that we want to see this project move forward. So it sounds like right now, we're not necessarily considering a budget impact for right now. We're essentially saying we want to ensure that this is a priority and that when we get the budget in May or June, we'll have it to look at. That's what it sounds like.
Well, the
That's
motion,
not what the motion is.
the motion that's on the floor is to commit us to spend the money to build it
Right.
I'll
so
tell you
that-
what the
that motion
caveat
would
is
have to
legally.
include that.
as
Yeah.
part of the 21 budget. So
And legal can
Yes.
correct me, but if we do this, we are binding the city manager to do it, or we have grounds to fire him.
Oh,
Yeah.
please.
Our budget yet. That we have to.
I mean, I think it's a terrible precedent to set to do this.
well, the motion is that we spend the $82,000 to construct this section of Greenway as part of next year's budget.
It needs to be clarified that it is part of next year's budget.
Is that my,
Yes, yes. Councilwoman Peters here, and the motion is to approve $82,000 to construct the section of the Greenway on Cassell Street from Vale to West Ward in the 2021-2022 budget.
this is to spend the money. It's not to say we support it and we'll deal with it later in the budget process. It's to actually commit the city to do the project.
Correct.
Is there any further discussion before we vote on that second substitute motion?
I think I'm pretty much maybe the primary person that's sitting in the middle of the road on this. And it's not because of a budget discussion. It's not because of whether or not we want to do it. In my mind, I'm saying if it was at any point of its inception, moved to the city, approved in any other plan, then it became ours, de facto ours. I just need to see that. If I see that, then I'm moving to approve. But I'm just saying I don't have that right now. So my goal was just to get that information. I understand. I'm not dismissing it. It's just like any other person on this board that has to make a conscious decision about their own. I just need that information. I can pretty sure tell you I can probably get that by Wednesday. So with that said, I make the motion, we table it to Wednesday.
Second.
There's a third substitute motion. Councilman Williams to table this item until our recess meeting on Wednesday. And seconded by Councilman Jones. Sorry, I'm taking notes. That's just hard to keep up with. Is there any discussion on the motion to table?
Councilman, this is Councilman Holmes. Councilman Williams, your motion seeks to clarify information about the nature of this project and where it rests.
Correct. That's all.
Okay.
I just have a legal question for our council. Since Wednesday is a recessed meeting,
Yes,
We're not
it's
technically.
technically an extension of this meeting.
it is.
So,
All of these motions will continue
okay.
there. Every substitute motion, everything else.
But is it effective to even have a motion to table it to later in the same meeting?
Probably not.
I think it's okay to do that.
All right.
Basically, what you would be
I
doing
just said
is,
suspend the rules and
I
we'll
mean,
move it to
truthfully,
later.
you would be amending the agenda.
Yeah.
And the order in which you are
Okay.
addressing items.
All right. Is everybody clear on the motion?
Which one?
The substitute motion number 3, which is to deal with this item on Wednesday. Quit messing with me. Okay. I'll now call the roll. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Moore?
Aye.
Councilman Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
No.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
Councilman Jefferson.
Aye.
The mayor votes aye. So the motion to deal with this on Wednesday, to table it till then, passes by a vote of 8-1.
And just a reminder too, that of course, the other substitute motions remain active.
That's right. So when we reconvene, we will be discussing substitute motion number 2, which is to commit to pay for the project at $82,000, unless there's a substitute motion number 4. We'll see. All right. Thank you, everyone. Good debate. All right, next is the Community Development Committee items. For that, I'll turn the meeting over to Councilmember Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. Just give me a second. Just trying to get my system. Actually, my computer went to sleep, so just give me a minute to catch up. Okay. The first item, I believe, per staff, I'm going to make a motion to move. Actually, that's not the first item. But that's a demolition order. No, I'll just go. I'll get to it, Lord. Item 2021-61, resolution, Community Housing Solutions of Guilford Incorporated, conveyance of property. City Council is requested to adopt a resolution approving the conveyance of the property. On that, I turn it over to Mike McNair.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Just to briefly review it, at the beginning of this project, which is a 19-unit subdivision, it was always contemplated that all 19 properties would ultimately be conveyed to CHS. However, due to watershed restrictions, we could not build or do any disturbance beyond the first 4 lots until the street was put in and the water quality control device, I've been hanging around engineers too long, was put in. And now that's all been done. And now the entire site is available for development. And what we would like to do is essentially, rather than give them all 15 lots at one time, you've already given 4, that we would convey them as requested as part of their marketing and sell as people pick out lots. And we would just do that as a as needed basis. So, excuse me. So we have the resolution and listing. You see the listing of the properties. They have all, if you've been up there, 2 of the houses are already framed up. And I believe they're taking offers on the other 2. And that project's really heating up. So we're trying to get in front of that and try to minimize any delays as they try to sell. You can't sell what you don't own. So we ask that you adopt the resolution approving the conveyance and that the appropriate city official be authorized to execute on necessary documents.
Thank you, Mike. Are there any questions for staff on this item?
You can see a map in your package that you can. So the ones that are crosshatched are the ones that they already own. So it's the rest of it.
All right, if there aren't any questions on this item, I'll make the motion to approve item 2021-61 resolution for the Community Housing Solutions of Guilford County Incorporated, conveyance of conveyance of properties over to them.
Second.
Yes, sir, we all are.
Okay. Councilman Holmes, how you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilman Peter?
Aye.
Mayor Tim Moore?
Aye.
Councilman Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
Aye.
Mayor votes aye. That item is approved by the-
Thank you, Mayor. The next item is item 2021-62, amendment of the 2020 urgent repair policies and procurement and disbursement. City Council is requested to approve the amended urgent repair policy. I turn it over to Mike, and I definitely don't want that little touch of good news to be looked over, but he might get started.
Okay, thanks, sir. This policy amendment is grounded in desire to improve service delivery. We've had problems really in part because of the size of the jobs. They're not large jobs. And so contractors are not as responsive as we would like for them to be. And sometimes jobs get put off because we can't get enough bidders. And so we put our heads together and talked with purchasing and budget and some other folks and kind of came up with a scenario that I think is a win-win for all involved. Number one is it will allow us to award a bid or award a contract based on one responsive bid. Now, what that does is it opens it up also more to small and minority businesses. Failing that, if we don't get a responsive bid, then we would have CHS under contract to execute the job. And the homeowner is not sitting there waiting for the next bid process. And so we've got, people on waiting lists. It's supposed to be urgent. So, but when it gets pushed back, the urgency gets lost. So this was a proposal we're making, and with your approval, we would send to North Carolina Housing Finance. Would only apply to that particular program. You can see the changes in the highlighted yellow. It's really the extent of
What generally are the price lines for these repairs?
8,000 to 10,000. So for some contractors, we're in an urgent repair only program. We don't do the Cadillac rehabs anymore. Can't afford to do them. And so when other cities around us do them, because we compete against Greensboro and Winston and PTRC and other folks, if they're doing them and we're not, then the contractors, particularly the general contractors, say it's not worth my time to submit a bid, much less to do the work. If I can get a $40,000 to $50,000 job over here, why should I come after your 10? So we've kind of accepted that reality and trying to do something that actually will improve performance for the homeowner.
Just for those listening online, the reason I asked the question about dollar amounts is because the dollar amounts that the mayor mentioned are not subject to state law or required bidding. They're not big enough to put us under that formal bidding process anyway. So we're not trying to circumvent state law or anything here. So I just, that's why I asked the question for those listening out there.
Any other questions for staff? Thank you, Mike. In that case, I'll make the motion to approve item 2021-62, amendment of the 2020 urgent repair policy.
Second. Motion, and there's a second by who? Councilman Hudson. Any discussion on this item? Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Moore? Aye. Councilman Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
Councilman Jefferson?
Aye.
The mayor votes aye. That item is approved by a vote of 9-0.
All right, next up is item 2021-63, contract amendment to CDBG. CV City Council is requested to approve this contract amendment. I turn it again over to Mike.
Yes, if you recall back in May when you approved the allocation of 353,000, what's the exact number? 354, 363 for CDBG CV contracts. And at the time we explained that we wanted to hold back a piece to see what happened rather than just throwing all the money out at once. And so now we've gotten to a point where all of the subrecipients have spent almost 70% of their funds, some of them in the 90% range. And so it's time. So what we've done is identified 4 agencies that are providing services that we think are the greatest need: utility, rent, mortgage, and are proposing to allocate that remaining 198,343 to those 4 agencies. 2 of those agencies, because of the amount, would require council action. The other 2 wouldn't, but we thought we would, put the whole picture out. Ask that you approve the contract amendments. I'm not sure that I need to add anything, but I'll certainly respond to any questions.
All right, any questions from staff on this item? I'll just say that this is basically one of our partners with I said it in the committee, but this is one of our partners with the operation in as much. Ton of hours, ton of volunteerism, and that's kind of why we're here. I guess making this motion to approve this contract, because they've shown good faith and effort with us in the past. So with that said, I'll make the motion to approve item 2021-63 contract amendment with the CDBG CV City Council requested to approve this item.
Second.
And there's a motion made by Councilman Williams, seconded by, I believe, Councilman Johnson. Any further discussion?
Mayor, I'll just say it only for rental and utility assistance. The thought came to mind to say thank you to city staff. Last week, we did a public meeting and the city of High Point was incredible showing support. We heard back from so many residents who were appreciative of the city hosting the Zoom webinar and getting all over YouTube and Facebook and whatnot. Lots of information, still getting calls from folks about that. So shout out to city management who enacted it, who was also there to text me to fact check a few things. Communications and public engagement. I mean, they were so huge. I think it's important for the public to know City of High Point was ready, and I think you guys had like 3 or 4 days to kind of put it all together, and we had thousands of folks listening and attending who have been helped by that so far. So thank you, city staff.
I concur. Excellent work. Thank you. That's it.
Any other items? Okay, Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Moore? Aye. Councilman Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson? Aye. Councilman Jones? Councilman Jefferson?
Aye.
The mayor votes aye. Item is approved by a vote of 9-0.
Thank you very much.
All right, next up is item 2021. Lori, I think the one we discussed is like last, so I don't know how I missed that, but the next up item is item 2021-64 ordinance demolition of dwelling 1700 Pershing Street. I will turn it over to Lori Loosemore, our staff.
Okay. Am I supposed to ask them to display the screen? Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Tonight, the first case I have is a property at 1700 Pershing Street. We first inspected this property on November 16th of 2017 and held a hearing on November 18th of 2020. Just so you know, the reason is we had some difficulty with owners. Both owners were deceased. We had to determine which one passed before the other, and then how to advertise in the paper for legal reasons and all. So we held the hearing on November 18th of 2020. No one appeared for the hearing. We issued an order to repair or demolish on January 6th of 2021 with a compliance date of February 5th of 2025. Excuse me, 2021. That's a long time, isn't it? and we have not heard from anyone about the property. It's been sitting for quite a while, and we've had to board it up. We've had to clean the property numerous times on the outside for the public nuisance and all. And they are delinquent in property taxes for 2012 through 2020 in the amount of $16,979.
Thank you, Lori. For the record, Madam Clerk, have we received any correspondence on this item for or against?
No.
Thank you. I am going to make the motion to approve this item, but I will tell you, I grew up near that area and that was a beautiful place. It is tough to see this, really tough. So I'll approve item 2021-64 ordinance to demolition of dwelling 1700 Pershing Street.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded, I believe, by Councilman Holmes. Or Johnson. Okay. I tell you, I'm looking forward to when these partitions can come down. And I hear real voices and not muffled voices. Any discussion on this item? Okay, hearing none. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Moore? Aye. Councilman Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
Councilman Jefferson?
Aye.
And the mayor votes aye. So item's approved by a vote of 9-0.
All right, and the last item, finally there, item 2021-65, ordinance of demolition of dwelling 1205 Filbert Place. I believe we're going to just say at recommendation of staff, I want to make the motion to turn this item back over to staff. And I'll turn it over to Laura to kind of give a little bit more information on it.
Okay, well, there's a motion that's been made, I guess, to remove this item from our agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Hudson. Okay. We'll now hear from staff. Did you want her to explain why it's being taken off?
If we're ready to vote, we can move on, but if you want to give some.
I can tell you why. The tax value of the house is really low. And of course, it needs repairs. We've had issues with vagrants and all around there, but recently the property owner is an older gentleman and he has put it up for sale. So I'm holding out hope that somebody will purchase it and fix it up in that area. Because like I said, the house really is not too terribly bad. It just has a really low tax value.
How long do you typically wait before you bring it back to us?
If they put it up for sale, if they have a buyer within, like a month, and I can meet with that buyer, find out that they have the financial means to do it. Maybe if they fixed up another property in the city and kind of vet it a little bit, then, I won't bring it back. We'll just give them the opportunity, a few months, whatever, to get it going. If not, it may be 2 months. And then if nothing's happening with it, no buyers, no bites or anything, I'll go ahead and bring it back.
Okay. Any other questions for staff or any discussion? Okay. The motion is to remove this item from the agenda. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Moore? Aye. Councilman Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
Councilman Jefferson?
Aye.
And the mayor votes aye. So this item is removed from the agenda by a vote of 9-0.
Thank you, Mayor. That's all I have.
Okay. Next on the agenda are the planning and development items, and I'll be handling those. Each of these items, if they're public hearing items, will not be handled tonight under the COVID statutes for public meetings. These will be held open for additional public comment for a period of 24 hours. And they'll be dealt with at our recessed meeting on Wednesday. If you would like to submit, anyone who would like to submit comments, you can do that at you can do it by email at publiccomment@highpointnc.gov. You can call the city's phone number. What's that number again? Okay, 336-883-3522. You can call and leave a message, or you can drop your comments in either of the utility payment boxes on the north or south side of City Hall. So with that, the first item is the annexation case 20-09, and I'm sure an accompanying zoning map amendment for that.
Yes.
And for that, I'll give the meeting over to Herb Shannon.
If they can put up planning and zoning commission presentations, please. And the first two items, annexation case 20-09 and the zoning map amendment 20-24 are related. So staff will provide a combined presentation. However, when council does take action on these items, we'll have to vote on them separately. This These next two agenda items pertain to approximately a 20-acre tract of land located along the north side of West Windover Avenue, approximately 800 feet east of the intersection of West Windover Avenue and Morris Farm Road. If you're taking a look at the overhead projection, that area that's highlighted in red is the site in question. It is located in the northeast portion of the city's planning area. This site also has approximately 570 feet of frontage along Morris Farm Road. The applicant's requesting annexation to have access to city utilities. The areas that you see highlighted in white are lands that have already been annexed into the city. Those areas in gray are unincorporated portions of Guilford County. This annex, as I noted, the applicant desires connection to city utilities, and thus they requested annexation. There have been several annexations in this portion of the city's planning area. This is a blow up of that area, and you can see there have been several requests in areas developed within the city of High Point along this segment of West Windover Avenue up to Guilford College Road and along Tarrant Road and Piedmont Parkway. You can see the site is for the most part surrounded by the city limits. As there are existing utility services in this area and service vehicles that are already traveling these streets, annexation of this property represents a logical progression of the city's annexation policies of this area. It would not negatively impact the city's ability to provide services. As for the zoning request, within the county, the site currently has an agricultural or AG zoning designation. The applicant is requesting rezoning to a conditional zoning RM16 or residential multifamily 16 district to support a multifamily development. The site is, except for two single-family dwellings that are on the bottom right side of the site along West Windover Avenue, this land is undeveloped. It looks like a large piece of property, but there are several impediments. There's a perennial stream that runs from the northeast to the southwest through the site. This is a blow up of the site. You can see how that stream bisects the property. But in addition to the stream, there's quite a bit of flood zone areas that run along the stream corridor, and the site's steep topography lies along the stream corridor. This is a topographical map of the site. For those members of the public who are unfamiliar in reading such maps, where the lines are further apart, the land is fairly level. Where the lines are close together, you have steep terrain. During the Planning and Zoning Commission review of this, there was questions about access to Windover, and I can get into more detail on that, but the applicants offered a condition that there be no access to Windover. They would have to cross that stream, and that would be a significant cost. At the bottom left, there is an area where many people thought that you could access, but if you look at that topography lines, they're extremely close together. It's about a 50-foot drop in that area that makes access difficult to place in that area. So this was a good map. I thought it was important to show council that the site does have quite a few impediments. I did mention the fact that you have the stream buffer area, but just to try and clear it up, we still have those 100 and 500-year flood zone area. Then that area outlined in red is where a gas line bisects the site. So when you look at all the impediments with the stream, the flood zone, the glass line, the topography, there's not a lot of contiguous land available for development. You have a nice area kind of to the northern part of the site, in a very limited area to the south running along West Windover Avenue. As far as surrounding zoning pattern, to the north, there is a single family development that's a planned limited development. That site was approved in the early 2000s for either as multifamily up to 10 units per acre or single family. Directly west of the site along Morris Farm Road, there are existing multifamily and townhome developments. The site abuts the Riverview townhome and multifamily development and the Parkway Village development. Over the past 20 years, there have been several multifamily developments built that have been annexed, received zoning approval, and constructed from along Tarrant Road, along this section of West Windover Avenue. Approximately 12 have received zoning approval and had developed. I would note for the members of the public, and included in the staff report that was made available to council, to the public, there's information about impact on public schools. That is just for informational purposes only, because a lot of times those are questions that are raised. Staff obtains that information directly from Guilford County schools as to school impact.
We also included transportation impacts. The applicant is proposing that access be taken from Morris Farm Road, the approximately 2 to 3 access drive. There's about 570 feet of frontage along Morris Farm Road. And that is, Morris Farm Drive. And that is classified as a collector street. It was built to handle higher traffic volumes than you would typically have on your local street. And with this application, there is a conditional zoning ordinance in which the applicant has offered conditions to restrict where development will be permitted. They've offered to limit density of the site, or that they will conduct a traffic impact analysis. And they've also offered conditions for right-of-way dedication along West Windover Avenue. As far as key points to note in the analysis, lands along this north side of the West Windover Avenue corridor are from Premier Drive to Hickory Grove Road are designated on the city's adopted land use plan for medium density residential. This is a copy of that portion of the land use plan for this portion of the city. Those areas you see highlighted in the brown are designated for medium density residential, which are intended for higher density uses, including townhomes and apartments at a density of 8 to 16 units per acre. I would also note there is a Guilford College West Windover Avenue corridor plan that was approved in 1995. That plan also supports higher density development along this segment of the Windover Avenue corridor. Included with this application, the applicant has a conditional zoning plan. This is part of their conditional zoning ordinance where they have divided the track along the stream, track A to the north, track B to the south. They have offered conditions that track B, there will be no development. That will remain as undeveloped land. Track A is where they will be focused their development efforts. They're looking at approximately 216 unit multifamily development. They've offered a condition that if for any reason development exceeds 220 units, then they will conduct a traffic impact analysis, and any improvements from that analysis they would have to install. And they've also offered a condition that vehicle access will only be from Morris Farm Road. That was to meet policies of the Windover Guilford College Road Corridor Plan. That plan recommends, when possible, that there be no direct access from that roadway to maintain that as a travel corridor. Key things to note from the findings section as far as compatibility, the requested conditional zoning RM16 district supports the same type of residential development that has already been established in this area along West Windover Avenue and Morris Farm Road. To minimize impact to the adjacent property owners, we've noted in the staff report that standards of the development ordinance pertaining to permanent landscaping, parking lot landscaping, exterior lighting, and open space, the development ordinance already governs those issues. The ordinance also has standards for screening of waste collection area and screening of ground-based mechanical equipment. You can see the site does abut a single-family development to the north. Staff has received several calls from that area as far as impact. We've noted that to mitigate traffic impact, there will be no access to that cul-de-sac street to the north. The only exception would be if it's for a single family development. This site does have about 25 feet of frontage onto that cul-de-sac. That condition means that if developed for multifamily, a driveway for that multifamily development cannot go to that area. You could have a situation where a single family parcel could be carved off and it takes access from that cul-de-sac, but not for a multifamily development. We've also noted that the development ordinance has standards for landscaping where you have multifamily next to single family. As far as impact on utilities or on public or municipal facilities, as previously noted, if development exceeds a certain threshold, a traffic impact analysis would be required, and any of those improvements would have to be installed. And finally, I would just note that the requested zoning allows the same uses that have been established in this area, same zoning district, RM16 that you see to properties to the west. And this is in conformance with the Windover Corridor Plan, which does support higher densities in this location. Thus, staff is recommending approval to rezone this site to a conditional zoning residential multifamily 16 district. The Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed this request at their January meeting and recommended approval by a vote of 8-0. The commission stated that the request is consistent with adopted policy guidance because, as conditioned, The requested CZ RM16 district is supported by relevant goals and objectives of the land use plan and the West Wendover Avenue, Guilford College Road plan. They also noted that the request is reasonable in the public interest because the zoning map amendment proposes to establish similar zoning as exists on abutting lands, which would enable development pattern consistent with this portion of the West Wendover Avenue corridor and along Morris Farm Road. That is a brief summary. I did go into a little more detail because staff did receive several phone calls and hoping that additional detail would help those members of the public who are listening. Are there any questions of staff at this time?
Can you, I'm sorry, can you repeat what you said about the traffic impact
The applicant,
analysis? But
when the Transportation Department reviewed this request, they've noted that from their analysis, if more than 220 units would be installed, that would trigger the requirement for concerns about doing a traffic study. So the applicant has offered a condition that if they go over 220 units, that they would do a traffic impact analysis. Any improvements that are noted from that analysis, they would be required to install.
That 220 number, is that a number that's consistent across our city limits, or is that different depending on the intensity of an area someone's developing?
That was based upon a specific review by the City of High Point's Transportation Department. They have a program, and Mr. McDonald can go into more detail, but they put this type development, what's going to trigger a point where we're going to need to do that analysis. So that's based upon their analysis of the type of units they're proposing. And
so that
at
number,
what point do you get to that? And that's based on this specific site.
I have one more question. Got a couple of comments on this from folks, and one of the things, if approved, did you speak to the developer? And maybe I missed it, as far as there seem to be concerns about the traffic on Morris Farm Road during construction. Are they going to build a construction road in far enough to where the staging and unloading and trailers, et cetera,
Staff did not get into that level of detail with the applicant because the property could always be sold to another developer. The main thing we focused on was based upon adopted land use policies. Is this request appropriate? And I've talked to several neighbors that we don't know who's going to develop the property. It could be this developer. It could be sold 3 or 4 times. So staff was not going to make commitments about how that would be handled when we don't know who's developing the property.
Thank you.
Anyone else with questions, comments? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Shannon. This item, as stated before, this item will remain open until our recess meeting on Wednesday, both the annexation case and the accompanying zoning map amendment. And if anyone out there wants to submit comments, you'll have a period of 24 hours to do that, and council may take action that night.
I believe the applicant is available to.
Okay. Yep. Would the applicant like to address council?
Yes, my name is Craig Stone with Winfield Properties. I'd like to thank council for allowing us the consideration for Wendover Heights and this particular property and site. You may know, as an extension of some of the work that we've done in the community, this amounts to, I think, the 6th community that we have proposed. This actually would be the 7th. And it's an extension of a number of the other sites that we've done, would be for working families throughout the community. I think that there was a specific question from Councilman Moore. Obviously, we're not there right now, so I hope that's who asked the question. Yes, we would have staging and construction those if we were to move forward. Outside of that, we'd like to present ourselves to answer any questions as the process moves along, and have tried diligently to work with staff throughout the process, and know that this is a staff consideration as we move forward. We'd have to work with different departments, TRC, those kind of things, and there would be a number of obligations and requirements that we would have to meet as we move through the process, and we would look forward to working with the city staff as we do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? All right. Okay, then we'll move on to the next item. And that item is High Point University zoning map amendment 20-25. Before, Mr. Chairman, before you jump on that, in your, to other folks in council, in your Granicus program are the public comments that we've already received. The clerk reminded me beforehand that she'd uploaded some additional ones, so you may want to refresh your documents in that program. Make sure that you've gotten all the up-to-date comments. Okay, Ms. Shannon, floor is
Yes.
yours.
Herb Shannon, Senior Planner. Your next agenda item, zoning map amendment 20-25, is a request by High Point University to rezone a 37.5 acre block bounded by North Centennial Street, East Lexington Avenue, Panther Drive, and East Ferris Avenue. As you may recall, in 2019, High Point University submitted an application to rezone this block to a conditional zoning institutional district to allow expansion of the campus. There were two single-family dwellings that at that time they did not own. So the rezoning came forward, the council approved it, but those two dwellings, one on McCain Place, one along Centennial Street, was not part of that application. They have since obtained ownership of those two parcels, so they submitted this request to update the zoning so that the entire block is governed by the same zoning conditions. All the previous adopted conditions are being carried forward. The only change is that these two single-family dwellings are now included in a description, and staff has noted that this would be a logical expansion of the campus, as it would be in character with the area, and it would, the inclusion of these two final lots in this block would be consistent with the policy of the core city plan. Staff is recommending approval to rezone this 37.5 acre area to a conditional zoning institutional district. The Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed this at their January public hearing and recommended approval. And they included a statement that the request is consistent with adopted policy guidance because the zoning site is designated as institutional by the land use plan and supported by policy of the core city plan. And the request is reasonable and in the public interest, as a zoning request will incorporate two remaining residential zone properties into the campus and create a uniform zoning district for all the lands in this area. Are there any questions of staff regarding this zoning map amendment? Thank you.
Ms. Shannon. Anyone from the applicant here to speak or online to speak?
This is Dan Pritchett with Jamestown Engineering Group. I'm available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Pritchett. Anyone have any questions? Okay, hearing none. Again, this item will be, we will take this item back up again on Wednesday at our recess meeting for action. Okay, next item is annexation and I believe an accompanying zoning map amendment.
Yes, the next two agenda items are also related. Annexation case 20-10 and zoning map amendment 20-20 pertains to a 9.5 acre tract of land located in northeast at the southeast corner of Gallimore Dairy Road and South Chimney Rock Road. In regard to the annexation request, the applicant's requesting annexation to have access to city utilities. As you can see from the above noted slide, the site does abut the existing corporate limits to the east and to the south. This is just north of the Piedmont Center Business Park. This would be a logical progression of the city's annexation policy, as the site does abut the city limits, and there are city utilities and city service vehicles already present in this area. In regard to the zoning map amendment, the applicant is requesting to rezone the site from the agricultural district and Guilford County zoning district to a conditional zoning light industrial district to support a future industrial project. Included with this application is a conditional zoning ordinance in which the applicant has offered conditions regarding lot combination and to meet most of the district standards of the employment center district. This site is at the northern edge of the city's planning area. This is a copy of the land use map for this area. Those areas you see in that purple shading is designated as restricted industrial by the adopted land use plan. And that land use classification is intended to accommodate office, warehouse, research and development, light manufacturing and assembly on larger properties. There have been several of those type uses developed in this area. Adjacent developments to the east and south are conditional use light industrial, and those were conditioned to meet the standards of the corporate park district. That is a zoning district under the former ordinance. When the current development ordinance became effective in 2017, that corporate park district was removed, and a specific zoning district, the employment center or EC district, was established for lands that had a restricted industrial land use map classification. The applicant has elected to request a conditional zoning LI district, as that is the manner in which the surrounding area has developed, but they have offered conditions that they would meet all of the employment center district except for the one pertaining to building orientation, as this is a corner lot. Key things that staff would like to point out from the staff analysis is the request as far as compatibility. The primary compatibility concern was the visual impact, including the Piedmont Center and along the Guilford College Road corridor, by meeting the standards of the employment center district, which deals with how your loading docks are faced, screening and so forth, that the request would be compatible with the higher standards that have been applied to this area. And that this is, as far as preferred development pattern, by meeting those higher standards, the request would be a continuation of the established zoning pattern and higher development standards in this area. Thus, staff is recommending approval to rezone this site to a conditional zoning light industrial district. This request is also reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission at their January meeting, and they recommend approval. The commission stated that the request is consistent with adopted policy guidance because, as conditioned, the requested conditional zoning light industrial district meets objectives of the community growth vision statement and the land use plan, specifically protecting the appearance of Gallimore Dairy Road corridor and allowing for continued restricted industrial development as designated. Furthermore, they stated that the request is reasonable and in the public interest because, as conditioned to meet district standards of the employment center district, the requested CZLI district will be similar and compatible with previous CZLI zoning districts in this area. That is a brief summary. Are there any questions of staff?
Anyone? Thank you, Mr. Shannon. Is the applicant available to speak to council? Or?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this is Mike Fox with the law firm of Tuggle Duggins, with address in 400 Belmead Street in Greensboro, North Carolina, and I'm here representing the applicant. I also have Richard Venori of Corey Corporation with me, and he is available to answer any questions that the board may have. I won't belabor this. You have had a very full agenda tonight. We are appreciative of the good work that your staff has done in working with us to get this request where they are very comfortable supporting it. It was, as you heard, unanimously approved at the planning board level. And what Corey plans to do on this site is more of the same of what you see in that same area, high quality, light industrial. And Corey is excited about having this development and investment in the city of High Point. And we would respectfully request that you approve this when you consider it again on Wednesday night. And either Richard or I are both happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Anyone with questions for the applicant? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fox. I appreciate it. And once again, action may be taken by council on Wednesday night. Are any of the pending items coming up for discussion tonight?
Yeah.
Okay. Ms. Shannon, I'll turn it over to you then.
The first item, that was annexation case 20-08. Staff provided a presentation at your February 1st meeting. The item was continued to the night's public hearing to allow the applicant time to get their annexation map in. That has been submitted and reviewed by staff. It's fine. So as we noted last time, this is a logical progression of the city's annexation policy for this area. Sufficient time has been provided for the public to submit comments. So if council would like, they can take action on this evening.
And have any additional, my notes say that no additional comments have been received. Is that true? Okay. Okay, well, then I will go ahead and make a motion to approve this item. Is there a second?
Mayor, excuse me, you have to have a motion to bring it out of pending.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. So moved. Motion has been made by the Mayor Pro Tem to bring this item out of pending. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilman Williams. Any discussion on the vote to bring it out of pending? Okay, hearing none. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Moore? Aye. Councilman Williams? Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
Councilman Jefferson?
Aye.
And the mayor votes aye. So this item is now out of pending, and I will make the motion to approve annexation case 20-08. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, I believe that was Councilman Hudson. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Moore? Aye. Councilman Williams? Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
Councilman Jefferson?
Aye.
And the mayor votes aye. So that item is approved by a vote of 9-0.
Mayor, I have I guess it's a COVID question, actually. We're able to take final action on these because they were put back in pending. They don't have to be pushed till Wednesday.
It's because we already did the public hearing on them
Yeah,
at a prior meeting, and it's been 24 hours since we closed the public.
Okay.
just enough time.
And just for clarification, that's only regarding the annexation. Your next agenda item, this will be the first presentation of this, so it'll be treated like your previous items where you provide 24 hours for the public to comment.
Okay.
And that is for zoning map amendment 20-20. This was initially to be brought up at the January meeting. The applicant requested a continuance. There was no presentation, so this is your first presentation on this item. This is a request to rezone a 3.6 acre tract of land from the residential single family 3 or R3 district. And it also has a conditional use office institutional CUOI district. So part of the site is R3, part of the site is CUOI. And the applicant's requesting rezoning to establish a conditional zoning general business district on the site. This site is located along East Chester Drive, approximately 0.2 miles north of the intersection of the I-74 interchange. If you've had a chance to drive by that area lately, there's been quite a bit of construction. And this site is right at that northwest corner where that intersection, where that signalized light is of East Chester Drive and Cypress Court. This site is surrounded by R3 zoning on all 4 sides, and those abutting use consist of either undeveloped parcels or residential dwellings. This segment of the East Chester Corridor has had multiple parcels zoned to the conditional use OI district and has developed with a variety of office and personal service use. I would note approximately 0.7 miles north of this site, if you're familiar where the old Drexel Heritage showroom is located, that site was rezoned to a conditional zoning general business district in 2018. However, that zoning approval from council specifically allowed that rezoning to allow the reuse of that existing 2-story, 79,000 square foot structure. And it was conditioned that the only use would be office institutional uses and an indoor storage facility. And it was also a condition that the exterior of the building could not be changed so as to keep the appearance of an office building. In regards to this application, the applicant is requesting rezoning to allow a convenience store, fuel sales, and a major eating establishment, and that's designated by the development ordinance as a restaurant with a drive-through window. As the current zoning does not permit those uses, they've requested the CUGB district. The applicant has included with this request a conditional zoning ordinance in which they offer conditions pertaining to transportation access that only allows a right-in only access to the site from East Chester Drive, and to provide a 100-foot wide buffer to the rear of the site adjacent to residential uses. They've also offered conditions to restrict uses. Proposed uses would be convenience store or fuel cell, major eating establishment, hotel or motel, major personal service uses, microbrewery, or a major retail sales use, and that use category allows retail establishments up to 50,000 square feet. The applicant has recently amended the request to add a condition to prohibit underground fuel storage tanks. There's a lot of information in the staff report, and I'm going to just provide a little bit of additional information for you. We did note on page 2 the various policies that relates to this site regarding the community vision growth statement, land use, and East Chester Drive quarter plan. As to the land use, this is a copy of the land use map for this portion of the city. Those areas highlighted in yellow are noted as for low density residential. The area in blue is for office. This segment of the East Chester quarter designates this area for office use. It's also an important factor to note that this site is within the city's watershed critical area. This is a copy of the city's watershed critical area. It's a composite of the watershed critical area and topography map. The area you kind of see to the right in the light purplish color is the City Lake General Watershed area. The area you see highlighted in green are those portions of the Ocala Lake Watershed critical area. That lighter green area is in tier 3. That kind of medium dark green area is in tier 2. Dark green right next to the lake, Ocala Lake, is up in tier 1. There are a lot of questions that came up far as from transportation. I'm going to just go over that information for those members of the public who did ask those questions of staff. This segment of the East Chester corridor carries approximately 40,000 trips per day. And the proposed commercial use based upon the traffic impact analysis, if developed with the convenience store, fuel cells, and the restaurant would have generate approximately 7,200 trips per day or over 200 trips during peak hour. The traffic impact analysis was submitted to the city's transportation department and was reviewed. The transportation department recommended that the conditional zoning ordinance be amended to state no access to East Chester Drive. The applicant had offered condition for a right and only. The transportation department that they noted is recommending there be no access, and the access be taken from that side street of Hilton Court. They also recommend construction of a turn lane with additional storage and taper that would go to that intersection, and right-of-way dedication along the East Chester frontage for those improvements. Regarding the staff analysis, I think it's important to note that East Chester Drive is a major thoroughfare in the city, moving traffic entering the city from I-74. It's also a major gateway to I-40 and PTIA Airport. Land development along East Chester Corridor has been primarily shaped by the East Chester Corridor Plan. To manage traffic and to protect the gateway qualities of this corridor, the corridor plan proposes limiting commercial development to well-established clusters or nodes. And that plan has specifically identifies a commercial node at the intersection of Main Street along the corridor to Centennial Street. It also notes at its midpoint, a commercial node at the East Chester Ski Club Road, Windover Avenue, Penny Road. That is a major node identified by the plan. And at the northern portion of the corridor, at the Regency Gallimardera Road intersection, that is a major node. Now, over the years, those nodes have expanded to abutting lands to accommodate additional commercial uses where the traffic could be adequately managed at those major intersections. The zoning site, as you saw from the land use plan, lies between commercial nodes. It's in an area where those areas in between the nodes that stops at Centennial Street and the node up at the Ski Club Road, Penny Road intersection, this area in between is designated for office type use. The interchange of I-74 was never planned for a commercial node as there are watershed protection restrictions, development constraints that would affect the efficiency of that interchange. Now, because of the recent traffic improvements that the state is doing at I-74 and East Chester Drive, the staff conducted an assessment of that section of the corridor due to those improvements. The East Chester Drive I-74 land use assessment studied the transportation project's impact on lands adjacent to East Chester Drive And that studied the area from Festival Park to the north, southward to Lasseter Drive. It's about a mile length, and it studied the land on both sides of that corridor. The assessment documented the following. First, that the land area in and around the I-74 interchange is narrow and does not offer a large area for development. This is that topographic map again. Once again, for those members of the public who are not accustomed to reading these maps, where those lines are further apart, the land is fairly level. Where it's close together is a steep topography. This provides a nice description of, you have the lake that kind of locks in development to the north where there's not a lot of room there. On the opposite side of East Chester Drive, you can see there is a classified stream and steep topography that limits development. I would also note the direct vehicle access from East Chester Drive is prohibited by NCDOT from the interchange to the right. So as you get off I-74 at this interchange, there are access restrictions that you can have no direct access to East Chester Drive until you get to that traffic light at the intersection of East Chester and Cypress Court. Once again, this is the watershed map. The land in this area is constrained by Ocala Lake to the west, which is part of the city's water supply, and by established neighborhoods. And the area is impacted by the development restrictions of the Ocala Lake watershed critical area, as a significant portion of the land to the west is impacted by tiers 1, 2, and 3 of this watershed area. This is a map taken from that land use assessment. That assessment divided that mile area into specific study areas. This 3.6 acre zoning site is contained within area 3 of the study area. That area 3 consists of about 6 acres that is split between the Ocala Lake watershed critical area, areas 2 and 3, and City Lake general watershed area. A portion of area 3 could be graded so that you can tilt the drainage so that it runs not into the watershed, but toward the street into the City Lake general watershed area, which would allow more impervious surface coverage and increased development intensity for this specific area. A key finding of this assessment is that the 3.6 acre zoning site is the only portion of area 3 or the surrounding area where you could have such development intensity that you, by grading in such a way that you increase development intensity. The surrounding area is more constrained with those watershed and topographical constraints. Thus, the zoning site is the only location where higher intensity commercial uses could be development. Now, although the land use assessment offered recommended changes in policies for this portion of this 1 mile segment that was studied, it concluded that the current policies for area 3 would include the zoning area, are still valid, and this area should remain as office, which would support office institutional district. It should be noted under the OI district, under the ordinance that was adopted in 2017, it allows a wide variety of additional development opportunities while still adhering to the policy of the corridor. Approval of the request for a conditional zoning general business district would enable commercial development of the zoning site inconsistent with the character of development both existing and proposed for this portion of the corridor. No other properties in the surrounding areas can be developed similarly. Therefore, the commercial development of the zoning site could negatively affect the potential of those surrounding properties to be developed with office and institutional uses or residential uses which are allowed by policy. Furthermore, the requested conditional zoning general business district will allow direct access to East Chester Drive, which is also inconsistent with the corridor plan, where it notes if you are in a corner lot, it encourages access to be taken from that side street, not from East Chester Drive. In conclusion, the established zoning and development pattern along this segment of the corridor primarily consists of office, institutional, and residential district. The adopted East Chester Corridor Plan does not support commercial zoning at this location, and the recent I-74 East Chester Drive assessment confirms the validity of that continued policy. Therefore, conditional zoning GB district is not consistent with the established zoning and development plan in this area or with adopted policy, and staff is recommending denial of this request. The Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed this application at their December public hearing. The commission also recommended denial by a vote of 9-0. The commission adopted a statement that the zoning map amendment 20-20 is not consistent with city's adopted policy guidance because the requested conditional zoning general business district would allow commercial development and access to Eastchester Drive at a location not supported by the goals, objectives, and policy of the Eastchester Corridor Plan. Furthermore, the commission stated that the request is not reasonable and in the public interest because the request would allow commercial development inconsistent with the character of development both existing and planned for this segment of the Eastchester Drive corridor and could impact potential development of the surrounding area. I would just remind council, because this request is being forwarded to you with a recommendation of denial from the Planning and Zoning Commission, a 2/3 majority vote is required by City Council for approval. I know that was a lot of information. I was, as we received a lot of phone calls on this, I was trying to address some of the questions that the public has received. Are there any additional questions that you have for staff at this time?
Yeah, thank you, Herb. It was very thorough of you. As Councilman Holmes, the amendment stated that there would be no underground fuel tanks, but still fuel cells. So how do they intend to manage the sale of fuel without underground tanks?
The applicant can probably address that, but it would not prohibit above ground fuel tanks. They're just saying it could not have underground fuel storage tanks.
Anyone else with questions for staff? Thank you, Ms. Shannon. If the applicant is connected, council will now hear from the applicant.
This is Judy Stalder. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. This is Judy Stalder, 3735 Admiral Drive, and that's in High Point. The owner and developer is Blue Ridge Companies. They're based in High Point, and Jim Gurditch is here to represent them and answer questions. Our engineering company is CPT Engineering, and they're located in High Point. Steve Webb is here to answer any questions. Our attorney grew up and still lives in High Point, Tom Terrell. And I've been here only 40 years, but I still like to say I'm from High Point as well. Fred, I'll get to that. I want to thank you for continuing this hearing from last month. I know you've heard plenty about this rezoning request already, but I want to start by telling you that Blue Ridge Companies heard what the neighbors had to say about fuel, underground fuel tanks. And we heard what P&Z had to say about underground fuel tanks. And I think that was the reason they voted 9-0 against this. Our intent in removing underground fuel storage tanks from this request was to eliminate any kind of fuel sales on this property. And I'd like to make sure that that's part of any vote on this, is that it be amended to say that there would be no fuel sales on this property, in addition to no underground fuel storage tanks. So no overground fuel storage tanks, no underground fuel storage tanks. So that leaves this official request to rezone from CUOI to CZGB. With the only difference being from the current zoning, are 3 possible uses. 1, a drive-through window for a restaurant. Restaurants are already permitted under the current zoning. And as you know, the reasons typically mentioned for not permitting drive-through restaurants often boil down to just encouraging pedestrian traffic. This site is an auto-oriented area with few, if any, pedestrians. And while we'd all like to see sidewalks on Eastchester Drive, it's never going to be a pedestrian destination. So a drive-through window, possibly a hotel or motel, and possibly a microbrewery. Those are the only 3 uses that we're proposing that are not allowed in the current zoning. And that's the only changes we're making now. And none of these uses should be a surprise or even raise an eyebrow at the intersection of an interstate highway and a major state thoroughfare. So to be clear, we're no longer asking for a convenience store with fuel cells or underground fuel tanks. And I'd like to say one more thing about the location. There's millions of dollars of improvements being made to alleviate congestion, yes, but also to accommodate expected growth. And new, well-done development is a return on that investment. And I think we can do better than the metal building and the little house perched on the edge of the improvements that are there now. This meets the primary recommendations of the land use plan and the recent land use assessment. And I can tell you 6 ways that it does that. First, the recommendation is combination of smaller lots, where we're combining, this site combines 2 smaller lots into one site. The second way is the protection of adjacent neighbors. And this may be the most significant condition of this rezoning request. It provides for a 100-foot wide undisturbed buffer, almost 35% of the total area of the site between new development and the adjacent neighbors and the lake. I sent you an email because we were too late to get a slide up on the display tonight, but an email that shows the current conditions and shows the current forested area of that 100 feet, and all of that will remain undisturbed. The remaining 2.47 acres adjacent to Eastchester Drive will make a nice sized development, but it's not going to be anything intense. It's not going to establish a major development or commercial node. It's just a little bit more intense than office institutional with the 3 uses that we're adding. This site that will be the part that will be developed is not visible from the homes at 1821 Eastchester or the condos at I-74 or many of the homes on Hilton Court. A third way this site meets and this request meets the primary recommendations of the land use plan is protection of the water supply. Whether this is new development that adheres to the Eastchester overlay aesthetics or what's there now, any kind of development here must meet all local, state, and federal regulations for water protection. Our engineer, Steve Webb, is available to answer any of your questions on this, but again, there will not be any underground fuel storage tanks or overground fuel storage tanks in this request. And this property can be graded to drain away from Oak Hollow Lake. So it's one of the, it is the only property there that can probably meet that, that kind of grading. Okay, a fourth way that this meets the primary recommendations of the land use plan is that it will maintain a safe and efficient transportation along NC 68. It is located at a signalized intersection. There aren't any other properties that are there. There is full access from a side street to this property. We have said that we will improve to have a deceleration lane along Eastchester Drive. And so I'd like to talk about the right-in only from Eastchester Drive. That is something that will depend on the uses, and we will defer to NCDOT on that. The TIA was performed according to the parameters dictated by High Point Department of Transportation and NCDOT. And there was some back and forth between all of us about which uses trigger which improvements. But the bottom line is that Eastchester Drive, NC 68, is a state highway, and the site is subject to NCDOT regulations for access. The improvements are dictated by NCDOT regardless of the conditions on the zoning request. It's just one of those elements that's technical in nature, and we defer to the regulatory body that's in charge of it. Frank Amenya from Davenport Engineering, who did the TIA, is also available to answer any of your questions this evening. Another way that this meets primary recommendations of the land use plan is the aesthetics. The aesthetics are codified in the Eastchester Overlay District. The overlay standards regulate the building materials. It can't be metal like the current building. It regulates the landscaping, the signage, and a lot of other little things. This also meets the primary recommendations of the land use plan by preventing zoning domino effect. This site is unique in the area, as Mr. Shannon said. It is situated so it ensures it will not trigger other rezonings for commercial uses. It's the only property in the area where much of the developable portion of the site can be graded into the general watershed area rather than directly into Ocala Lake. The site is relatively flat, while many of the other properties have topographic issues. And as stated before, it is at a signalized intersection with full access from a side street, as required by the Eastchester overlay. I'd like to conclude this part of our presentation by emphasizing this site is different from those around it and can be graded away from draining into Ocala Lake. We're also providing that buffer between any development along Eastchester and the adjacent property owners and the lake. The TIA is done, and we're looking for guidance from NCDOT as we begin our site development. But most importantly, the only change this request is asking for is the addition of 3 uses: a drive-through, a hotel, or microbrewery. At this time, I'll turn this over to Tom Terrell, who will talk about land use designation specifically.
Thank you, Judy, and thank you, members of council. I hope you can hear me clearly. I'm Tom Terrell with the law firm Fox Rothschild, 529 West Parkway in High Point. Judy has already made some of the points that I was going to make, and I don't need to repeat all of them, but I am going to address the land use policies that the staff used in order to recommend that you don't approve this. And if you go to the next slide, please. The reason is not only in the new land use study that's being done, but even using the old study that's the basis of our the staff's recommendation, they completely ignore 35 years of changes in state law, ordinances that we have adopted, corridor growth, local policies that we now have in place, none of which existed in 1985, and they do this in their recommendations as though it's still when we back in the 80s when we started the original study of this corridor. Next slide, please. You saw the history. I think if you don't know it, it's in the study itself, but that plan started in 85. It was adopted in 86. It was tweaked once, made a little bit stronger in several places, but it really remained and still remains apparently the exact same study that we did, we adopted in 1986. Next slide. Now, this is why it's no longer relevant. In 1989, North Carolina adopted very strict water supply watershed regulations. The city of High Point followed 3 or 4 years after that with the local codifications of those watershed regulations. We no longer allow zoning boards or councils to decide whether a zoning application is dangerous to the water supply. The state scientists have come up with watershed regulations. They're codified, they're based in science, not what we think we want or don't want. Same thing with transportation. This used to be subjective. I remember those days very, very well. You need to trust me. The city of High Point does not want, nor does it need to return to those days where everything was headbutting over the subjective requirements for transportation mitigation. We've codified those now, and we bring in the experts, third-party experts. This analysis that staff gives you, though, is telling you it's not in the experts' hands. They're telling you it's in your hands as a subjective decision. That's wrong. Eastchester Corridor overlay are objective. They are codified. You don't decide subjectively on a case-by-case basis if something is pretty enough for this corridor. You either meet them or you don't. Now, same thing with what was called a domino effect. This place is built out. High Point has changed a lot since then, but the way we're looking apparently at all of our policies is stuck in the past, and we need to move forward to where we are now. Next slide. And this, again, this is an issue because we cannot use 1985 ordinances and laws for current issues. Go to the next slide. Now, a little bit of in-depth on this. I just mentioned this a few moments ago, but I can't say it enough, is that water supply watershed regulations and how we protect Oak Hollow is codified. It is very objective. We control density, we control impervious surface percentages, we control what uses are and are not allowed. And this is a situation where you are allowed or you're not allowed. And what we've been talking about in this case is grading the site so that this use would actually no longer be in the Oak Hollow watershed. That has to be recognized because we would be strictly following the law that is applicable. Go to the next slide. Now, traffic mitigation. Once again, a lot of us who were on the Zoom call remember those days, but in '99, it was very controversial. It went on for several meetings. The city of High Point adopted a policy whereby a developer who triggers a certain number of uses at AM or PM peak is required to hire a third party to decide. And this is a third party engineer to determine what is mitigation that is required. Is it dangerous? Is it not dangerous? And these studies cost anywhere from thousands of dollars to tens of thousands of dollars. And again, it's an objective decision. So let's go to the next slide. And I want to go over, for those of you who don't read these things and you think this is just for the transportation department to analyze, let me tell you what's in here. Davenport Engineering used SimCrow and SimTraffic modeling. This is among the most sophisticated transportation engineer software in the world. It is used by NCDOT. It is used by transportation engineers in almost every developed country you can imagine. They also use the Institute of Transportation Engineer Trip Generation Manual, which is based upon thousands of studies done across the country where they take averages to decide or to determine what is the traffic, the expected traffic coming out of a certain use. They used our highway capacity manual, all of the NCDOT policies and forecasts. They met with our local transportation staff. They met with state DOT. They went out there and they did conservative assumptions. So go to the next slide. We cannot do what the transportation staff or the planning staff, somebody, whoever wrote the staff report, did when they wrote. I'm going to quote from the staff report. Quote, the requested district does not protect transportation efficiency, nor does it promote safety, because it does not include the transportation department's recommendation for the development to take access from Hilton Court. That recommendation is not based upon a single study. We're talking about Now, going from all of these thousands of dollars we're making citizens spend to get transportation engineers to analyze something and to subordinate it to what staff wishes, staff wants, staff prefers, staff desires, that is not the way this policy is written. When Davenport Engineering says there is adequate capacity for the project's traffic, we have to accept that. They are the experts. They are using all the standards of transportation engineers. It's like when a civil engineer says the bridge is strong enough to hold your car, we accept their analysis and all of their math. When they say no improvements were triggered at I-74, we accept it. When they say a right-in only entrance will, quote, alleviate queuing and delay, we need to accept that. So this is, as I say here, it's at most a TRC issue, as Judy alluded to, for the staff to look at the very specific use and see what that specific use might do. And of course, NCDOT is not obligated to follow the local ordinance, but the city is. Next slide, please. Now, the aesthetics of the Gateway Corridor. I was actually shocked to see this. Judy represents innumerable developers who just cringe because they have to comply with all of these overlay protections. But you know something? We've codified it. It's in the law. And our job is to say you have no choice. If it says your sign cannot be this, it cannot be this. If it says your landscaping must be that, then your landscaping must meet that standard. This is all codified, everything from what does it have to be brick or not? If it's in the ordinance, you can't go below that. So the error in the staff analysis is that you are supposed to use a subjective zoning decision to decide whether or not any use here is going to be, and I'll just use the phrase, pretty enough for this corridor. Actually, we've made that decision when we adopted these Eastchester corridor overlay. If we don't like the Eastchester corridor overlay provisions and we think they need to be strengthened, well, let's strengthen them. But when somebody comes along, before anything is built and you've seen it, don't start judging it as being unattractive in any way. Next slide. Now, protecting the neighborhoods from incompatible development, those are the actual quotes from the study. Arguably, this is a zoning decision. This is something that you could do. But then again, you also have to ask, is there a neighborhood and is there something to protect and is it incompatible? And I'm going to go to the next slide. I want to show you, this is what Judy was talking about. Cypress Court can't see this. If you're on the site, you cannot see Cypress Court. Same thing for the other properties nearby. There's a lot of this that is just not seen at all. Next slide. Between Cypress Court and this site, these are the two houses. If you go up close to them, I would argue to you they represent not the future of this corridor, but the past, and they just happen just to still be there. I don't think this is a quote unquote neighborhood we're trying to protect. The house on the right is the one that has all of the monuments in front. Let's go to the next slide. Now, Hilton Court has 3 houses and an abandoned trailer. That's right next door. You know, I'm sure that those are wonderful places to live, but you have to ask, at what point do we have a neighborhood that we're trying to protect? Go to the next slide. Here are the houses on Hilton Court. Next slide, please. And here's the abandoned trailer in the third house right here. That's very far back from Eastchester. Next slide. There are a couple of houses back here. I don't think in fact, I don't know in any circumstance where 2 houses comprise a neighborhood. Next slide, please. The staff report suggests that there is something that is acceptable out on this corridor, and that's something called local convenience. I challenge everyone who was part of this call to name one business in High Point that only serves the neighborhood around it. I can't think. I live here. I've grown up here. It really is, for market purposes, it's a fiction, because the smaller your business is, the greater the geographical reach you must have if you're going to survive. So, there are a lot of small businesses, coffee shops, things like that, but people come from a long way in order to shop there. Next slide. So highest and best use, this is probably in the end an analysis that we need to be making. Nobody, I think we all know this, nobody is going to put a single family home here. There may be folks who suggest that that's the logical thing, but it's not going to happen. It is too small. You don't see people or apartment developers coming in for a lot this size for multifamily. You also have impervious surface issues, because an apartment's not going to carry the freight to grade the site so that it goes into the City Lake watershed. If we're going to stand back and wait for more office development, I think that it's going to take a while. The office demand is getting weaker. We will have more office growth on Eastchester. I think that we will have it, but it's getting weaker. The more we are all getting used to working from home, it cannot be something with underground or above ground storage tanks. So the highest and best use, other than just leaving it as an ugly metal building, is to have a small tract retail, and that's all this would be, is a small tract retail that can carry the cost to grade the site so that it drains over to the general watershed of City Lake. That would be the most logical use, and we ask that you favorably accept this application.
Anyone have questions for the applicant?
I've got a couple, Mayor. This is Councilman Moore. First question I have is for staff. Mark, do we know or have an update on when they expect the improvements that are underway on 68 to be done?
We would anticipate those interchange improvements probably this year.
Thank you. And for the applicant, the deceleration lane, is that that's part of your proposal, correct? That will go in no matter what,
That's correct. It was part of the recommendations of the TIA that we've accepted that.
And in the interim of when we delayed this from the first presentation, have you spoken out to some of the concerned citizens with any of the new items you've just presented to us?
We have not.
And fuel tanks of any kind are not going to be on the property?
No fuel tanks.
Okay. Anyone else have questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Regarding this item, this is Councilman Jefferson. We've seen, I guess, in writing that there won't be the underground. This is my first time hearing in this meeting that we won't have the overground either. Is there some way, I guess, we can ensure that we get that somewhere in the writing that there won't be any overground? And then also, I guess, just wanting to feel a little comfortable maybe about, would hate to approve this and then this site actually end up being sold off to someone else who has different plans. And but assuming that the land use we put in is going to be restrictive and prescriptive.
Madam Attorney may be getting you an answer, but this is being altered by the petition. So these conditions, you will be voting on as a part of this land.
So it's not like they can sell it. Okay.
They will go with the plot.
Okay. So they couldn't just sell it and
Right. And Mr. Shannon also has some comments about something being in writing as well.
Just clarification on that. This evening, the applicant offered additional conditions than what was initially provided. The development ordinance states that any conditions to be acted on by council must be submitted in writing at least 2 business days prior to you taking action. The only thing that we've received in writing as of this evening is that there will be no underground fuel storage tanks. All the other conditions which the applicant has offered this evening, those have not been submitted in writing. So in order for those to be part of your consideration Wednesday, I guess before midnight this evening, they have to submit those in writing to the Planning and Development Department.
I don't know how they could be submitted and be considered and voted on Wednesday.
Did the applicant hear that?
Would the council like to postpone its vote for another, until 2 more weeks after that?
Mr. Tom, I believe you're going to have that time period after you submit those comments. That's when the clock would start on the COVID 24 hours and everything.
And also, Tom, this is Councilman Holmes. With such wholesale changes to this project, to Mayor Pro Tem Moore's point, is there plans to reach out to the public? There was, overwhelming resistance to the original project scope. With these changes, are there any plans? Were there any plans to reach out and have another public hearing to allow these changes to be expressed to the public before bringing these? Since if I'm not mistaken, there's no plans to go back before planning and zoning. Is there any plans to publicly hold a hearing to express the changes to the public?
If that is something significant you would like the applicant to do, I think the applicant would be willing to I guess in the form of a letter to everybody in the notification list and those who have sent emails to officially make those points.
I think that would be appropriate. Seeing this is in my district, my ward, and I get all the calls. Yeah, I think that would be appropriate to update them on the changes.
Madam Attorney, technically, we have not taken a vote to even take this out of pending.
True.
So this item is technically still in pending, even though I guess we started a public hearing tonight. So my assumption is we can always just leave this in pending and pick it up in March.
That'd be fine. And it'll give them an opportunity to put that in writing and also get that letter out to the neighbors.
Okay. Anyone have an objection to just leaving this in pending?
I would recommend leaving it.
Yeah, let's leave it.
Just a clarification for the public. If you could note a date specific so the public has a clear understanding of when you're going to reconsider.
I think our next meeting is March 1st. So it'll stay in pending until March 1st. Okay. To the applicant, Tom, are you clear on what council is doing and what we've asked?
Yeah, let me repeat it. And if Judy has other understandings, I think she'll jump in. I'm hearing council asking the applicant to explain these changes in writing in every way reasonable to the people who have communicated to the city, as well as to those people who live within the notification area. And we also need to clarify that fuel cells, in addition to underground storage tanks, will not be allowed as part of the project.
Correct. I think that's Mr. Shannon's approaching the microphone though. So
Herb Shannon with the Planning and Development Department. And also the applicant needs to submit those changes in writing to the Planning and Development Department.
Got that, Mr. Terrell?
Yes, we understand.
Okay. All right. With that, I think that was our last planning and development item. It's almost 8 o'clock. We've now to the general
Mayor.
business agenda, and we have some minutes to be approved. Whoop.
I'm sorry, I just want to get one point of clarification so I understand. Your intent by leaving it pending is to continue the hearing
Correct.
until March the 1st.
Correct.
And at that time, if you decide to act, you'll close the hearing and then there'll be a 24-hour period after that for public comments before you take action.
That's correct.
I want to make that sure in case anybody's listening so they understand that time frame.
Yep, that's correct. We wouldn't be taking action until March the 3rd, which would be the adjourned meeting from March the 1st. Okay. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? Motion has been made by Councilman Williams. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Holmes. Any discussion on the minutes? Okay, hearing none. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters? Councilwoman Peters, are you with us? How do you vote? Mayor Pro Tem Moore? Aye. Councilman Williams? Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones? Aye. Councilman Jefferson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters, are you with us? How do you vote? Hearing no vote. And the mayor votes aye, so that meeting, the minutes are approved. This meeting will be recessed until 5:30 on Wednesday, when the council may take action on the various public hearing items. If anyone out there wants to comment on any of those items, you will have 24 hours from now to submit your comments. And this meeting is now recessed on Wednesday.
Mayor,
Oh, hold on.
I do have a need to bring you and the council into closed session for attorney-client privilege purposes.
Yeah, we will need a motion to go into closed session for attorney-client privilege.
So moved.
It's a motion by Councilman Hudson. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Jefferson. Anyone opposed to going into closed session? Okay, council's now in closed session.
Stay safe, drive responsibly, and all the best.
You're going live. Hey, this meeting of the High Point City Council is back out of closed session. And this meeting is now in recess until 5:30 on Wednesday afternoon.